We are back and better than ever. Thank you for tuning in to the live premiere tonight of our second year fantasy breakout candidates. Again, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you to those of you that have shown your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Tell a friend, bring him back here for the next time that we have a video, which I'm not sure when that's going to be. Starting a new job tomorrow. I'm not sure what that hours I'm going to be working, so I'm not sure exactly where we're going to go from here, but we are glad that you showed up for tonight. If you have any fantasy questions, as always, put them in the comment section. We do have several really interesting questions or comments to get to. We're going to start off with Kaliba King again, who asked, who do you think has the best receiving core on offense? That's a really good question. There's a lot of really good wide receiving cores, but I would probably say that the first two that come to mind are the Kansas City Chiefs with Demarcus Robinson, Sammy Watkins, and of course at the tops with Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman speed. And then the other one is the Dallas Cowboys. I hate to give the Cowgirls any love, but they do have Amari Cooper, who is the #1 wide receiver. Jerry Jones, took him some guts to give up a first-round pick for him, but it paid off. Michael Gallup is slowly turning into a #1 wide receiver. I'm not sure if he's in the Cowboys' future plans at all, or if they're going to move him in some other deal. And then they just drafted CeeDee Lamb, who will probably play a lot in the slot, who's a yards after the catch monster. So those are probably the two top receiving cores, but there are a lot of them really in the NFL. The receiving has gotten better the past couple years. I think another wide receiver heavy team to keep an eye on at least is actually my Pittsburgh Steelers, just because of the youth. I'm not a big James Washington fan, okay? I'm not. But I do like Chase Claypool, who they brought in this year. A lot of people think Deontay Johnson could be a Pro Bowl wide receiver this year. And with a healthy Ben coming back, Juju will hopefully have some better numbers. So I'm trying not to show too much bias there, but I'm just saying that's one to keep an eye on. They're an up-and-coming receiving core. Not a huge fan of all the moves they've made at that position, but I think they are an up-and-coming. And, you know, for those out there that are Steelers fans, hit me up in the chat and tell me what you think. Should the Pittsburgh Steelers sign Martavis Bryant? I actually think that should be something that we should consider. I'm just saying that probably won't go over well among Steelers fans, but with the last few years of Ben Roethlisberger, stack up, man. I mean, get as many weapons as you possibly can, even if it's not necessarily a need. You'll bring him in on a vet minimum contract. With the new CBA policies, it'll be less likely that he gets into trouble for his drug abuse, which I don't agree with the rule. I'm just saying, you know, now that's there, let's take advantage of it, to be honest. I think that would be a low-risk, high-reward signing, you know. What do I know? But I think that would be something good. He also mentions that he thinks the Eagles are going to... He's replying to Stephen Poor's comment. He says that the Eagles wouldn't be surprised if they throw a ton of deep balls this year because they have all of the speed that they drafted this year and through the sign of Marquise Goodwin, who I totally forgot about. Stephen Poor, the original comment, says, I agree with Jalen Reagor and pump the brakes on him. The Eagles are planning on playing him at one receiver position and to be Deshaun Jackson's understudy. My prediction is that he might only get 4 to 6 touchdowns this year. I believe he will have good games every now and then, but won't be consistent where fantasy owners can count on him on a week-to-week basis. Alshon Jeffrey will be on the roster still at the beginning of the season, but might miss the first few weeks due to injury that he suffered last year. Also, Eagles got Marquise Goodwin, so hopefully he can stay healthy. I totally forgot about Marquise Goodwin, so that's yet another weapon, another guy that runs the sub 4.4. Goodwin probably can run the 4.2 still, so the Eagles have a lot of speed. Not sure how it's going to work this year. It's going to take time to gel. He also says, in keeper leagues, would you draft Tua late in the draft, or would you wait till season is almost over with the hope to pick up Tua off the waiver wire since he could break out in his second year in the NFL? Now, that is a really, really good question. In keeper leagues, I'm currently not in any. I've been in keeper leagues before. And, you know, it's important to take advantage of that waiver wire towards the end of the year. Any injured players, pick them up, especially if your team's garbage. I think a lot of it depends on where you are as a team. If you're in a league where you have a deep bench and you can afford to hold up one roster spot, even though you know he's not going to do you anything this year, definitely go for it, because I think Tua is legit. He's going to be a monster. And for that instance, if you think Aaron Rodgers is going to go in the next couple years, maybe even consider doing it with Jordan Love as well. I'm not a Justin Herbert fan, so I wouldn't do it with him. But you know, that's definitely something to consider. If your team is garbage, or like, let's say, you know, you're week 8 and you're 2-5, you're going into week 8 and you're 2-5 or something, you know, you don't think you're gonna make the playoffs, maybe that would be a good time to pick him up if he is still available. But again, that will depend on the league. But if you're in a league where you can afford to take some futures onto your roster, definitely, you know, I'd consider drafting him in the later rounds. And who knows, you know, the Dolphins have made some bad quarterback decisions in the past. You know, maybe they will even sneak Tua onto the field this year. I hope they don't, because he needs to be fully recovered from his injuries. But with the Dolphins organization, you never know. But I do think Brian Flores has something good going there. We also have one more question. This one is from Fantasy Spartan. He says, Ruggs will be the next Tyreek Hill or Marquise Brown. He's my top rookie breakout candidate. Thank you for the comment, Fantasy Spartan. It was good to see you on the live premiere on Saturday. I like Henry Ruggs. I actually had him rated above CeeDee Lamb in my draft rankings. Jerry Jeudy, I think, is going to have a slightly better year just because his route running ability will allow him to get yards after the catch. I'm not sure what he'll do in the red zone. But Ruggs, I think, in the future, he could be the next Tyreek Hill. He has that type of speed. Whereas Hill is more of a deep threat. You know, you throw it to me 50 yards downfield, I'm going to torch you. Whereas Ruggs is more after the catch as well. Throw it to me on a 5-yard slant pattern, and then I'll take it to the house. So there are some slight differences in their game. But going by speed, yes, I definitely think he could be the next Tyreek Hill. And we see what people in that division were trying to do. The Broncos bringing in speed and stuff. They're bringing in receivers with KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy. That division is stacking up on weapons because they know we can only hold Mahomes to so much. We're going to have to try to outscore him. So Ruggs, I'm not as high on this year because he's coming off of an injury. He's had some offseason injuries. Not sure if he had surgery or not. But I would hold off on Ruggs just because of that. If you're in a deeper league and can take a chance, definitely. But I would probably take Justin Jefferson, Denzel Mims, maybe even Chase Claypool, all before Henry Ruggs. But those are all very good questions and comments. Keep them coming. You all are welcome to chime in anytime you'd like using the comment section. If you're new and you want to add something in the comment section, or if you're watching in the live chat, definitely put that in there and I will answer it on the next video. So, like I said, we're getting into second-year fantasy football breakouts. This is where the gold's going to happen this year. We don't know what to expect from the rookies because of a shortened offseason. So there's a lot of names I'm going to give you. I have 23 names we're going to go through. Some of them we won't spend a whole lot of time on. But we're going to start off at the quarterback position. There's 2 quarterbacks that are poised for breakout seasons. And one of them is one of my favorites, Drew Lock. He was my number 2 quarterback last year. I had him ahead of Daniel Jones, who is the other quarterback we'll get into in a minute. And I had him ahead of Dwayne Haskins. He was my number 2 quarterback. He doesn't have the same playmaking ability as Patrick Mahomes, but when you combine the arm strength with the athletic ability and the ability to kind of make something out of nothing every now and then, I think Locke, you could kind of think of him as a poor man's Patrick Mahomes. I really could. I wish they would have addressed the offensive line a little bit more. I believe they did bring in Graham Glasgow in free agency, but I don't believe they signed anyone. They didn't draft anyone. That said, Mike Munchak, as a Steelers fan, I think he is truly the best offensive line coach. I was heartbroken when he left. I totally understand why he wants to be with family and everything, be closer to his home. But I think that if he can get that offensive line playing, the Broncos could be a sneaky playoff team. They may even be able to do some damage in the playoffs. Because I really think Drew Lock's legit. They have, like I said, we already mentioned their rookie weapons. Put that along with Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant, who we'll get into once we get to the tight ends in a few minutes. And they brought in Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay in the backfield. I mean, this offense is stacked. And don't leave out Albert Okwuegbunam, the rookie tight end, that we didn't really get into in the rookie fantasy video. Probably won't have a huge impact year one, but he has that rapport with Drew Lock already. So it's something to keep an eye on. The other guy is Daniel Jones, and he has weapons as well. He has Evan Engram, who, if I don't draft a tight end early on, I can get him in the 8th or 9th round. That's not a bad buy. The only thing is you're going to have to make sure you at least draft one more tight end on your roster because he is so injury-prone. But I think he could get a lot of targets. He looked really good with Daniel Jones at the beginning of last year when he came on the scene. But all Jones has to do, really, literally, if you look at the numbers, to be a top 15, top 10 fantasy quarterback this year, is to cut back on the turnovers. He had 20-some turnovers, didn't he? He had an incredible amount of fumbles last year. I mean, there have been very few quarterbacks in NFL history that have had fumbling issues, and that's what's caused their downfall in the NFL. Okay, I think he's going to get better with ball security, and that's really all he has to do to really have a fantasy breakout season. It just put up similar numbers to what you did last year for an entire season, which I think he can do. They drafted Andrew Thomas at left tackle. Hopefully, if they move Nate Solder to the right tackle, maybe that helps as well, but I think Solder is about done. He worked well in New England, but that's about it. It's very difficult because sometimes you don't know whether to trust any former New England Patriots in free agency. They tend to get the most out of them, and then when they go somewhere else, they're garbage. But they have good receivers. Darius Slayton we'll get into in the receivers in a minute. Of course, you have Saquon Barkley in the backfield. They did bring in another tight end later on in the draft, back up Evan Ingram. They had the guy from Stanford last year. The name is slipping me at the moment, but he actually didn't look too bad last year as well. And Golden Tate, they still have their... So a lot of smaller weapons. They don't have a whole lot of size at the receiver position, but they're guys that are going to get after the catch yards, and that's where Jones is really going to make his throws in between the numbers on shorter throws. So two solid quarterbacks. I think both of them you can afford to draft, especially if you have something solid at the quarterback position already, and they bring starter upside. To the running backs, I have 5 here I'm going to give you. First of all, our Eagles fan, Stephen Poore, can probably give us some insight here. Miles Sanders. A lot of people were questioning whether the Eagles would bring someone in. They still could. Devontae Freeman is still staying out there, but I've heard the Bucs have interest in him. We already saw the Seahawks bring in Carlos Hyde. So it's really down to Devontae Freeman and LaShawn McCoy, who I've actually talked to Stephen, and he's not really into LaShawn McCoy. You always wonder about the ball security with him. He's always holding it with his left hand, far out. People are hot and cold on LaShawn McCoy, and he is getting older. But Miles Sanders, if he is the workhorse back, I think he should be in first-round consideration, late first round, maybe early second. There's Boston Scott there, so he's a guy that maybe you can consider taking in the later rounds if you think that they're going to try to employ some sort of committee, because that's generally what the Eagles have done under Doug Peterson. Peterson likes committee, doesn't like a workhorse back. But Miles Sanders can do it all. He is a good receiver out of the backfield, and he can pass block at a fairly high level. So he's going to see the field a lot. Again, we'll see if they bring in someone. I don't really know who else is available. Jay Ajayi, maybe. May they bring Jay Ajayi back? That would be kind of funny. But they still have some pieces there. May they bring it back. Donald Pumphrey. There's several other names that could be floating around. But Miles Sanders is the clear-cut number 1 right now, and I think you will get really good production from him. And I still think that offensive line is going to be really good, even with the loss of Jason Peters. Moving on to Darrell Henderson, I touched on him in the rookie video when we were going over Cam Akers. That's why I'm lower on Cam Akers. Darrell Henderson, he does have some vision problems, and I know the coaching staff isn't super high on him because of that. But if they just give him a chance, this guy is a touchdown waiting to happen. We saw Anthony McFarland got drafted by the Steelers this year. They're very similar running backs, except Henderson, I think, is even more explosive. I compared him to Jamal Charles and Kareem Hunt last year, and he has that same explosiveness. He can catch passes out of the backfield, and he is a home run hitter. If he hits the hole, he's gone. He was so fun to watch at Memphis, and he was my number 1 running back last year. I haven't given up on him, and hopefully as a fantasy owner, you haven't either. If you can get him in the 10th round or later, I'm considering taking him in my leagues, especially because the running back position is so thin this year in fantasy. I think you have to consider guys like Henderson who could bring starter potential. They also have Malcolm Brown there as well, so you have to put that into consideration. But I don't think he'll have a huge role this year because they seem to really like Cam Akers, and hopefully there'll be a big role for Darrell Henderson as well. David Montgomery was another guy that was drafted in the 3rd round last year. I thought Henderson would have been a better fit for the Bears, and I still think he would be. But they took David Montgomery instead, and he had a decent year last year. The offensive line was kind of up and down, but they did improve it through the offseason, bringing in a guard. the Nick Foles at quarterback position, if you think that's an upgrade from Mitchell Trubisky, I'm not sure what to think with that. I liked Trubisky, that I just don't think they put him in a position to succeed. But, Montgomery is a guy, he's going to get the tough yards on 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 2s, he's going to get the yards. And he actually showed that he can catch passes out of the backfield, which was kind of a knock on him coming out. He has Tariq Cohen, who's going to be doing most of the 3rd down work, who I really like. But if you can get him probably 7th or 8th round, wouldn't be a horrible buy. I just don't know how many carries he's going to get. And if the Bears are trailing early on, they're going to have to throw it. So I would invest more in Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller, and their wide receivers than I would, maybe even Javon Wims, as well at the receiver position, than I would with their running backs. Devin Singletary. I truly think this could be a 50-50 split between him and Zach Moss by the end of the year. But Devin Singletary looked really good, and he got a lot out of... his stock really went up towards the end of last year, towards fantasy playoff time. He had some nagging injuries. But when he was healthy, he had some 20-point games last year and stuff. He was getting, 8 catches a game for 60-some yards and a touchdown, plus he was rushing for 60-some yards. And he's going to get you those kinds of numbers. He was a really good fit in the offense last year that they employed. And Josh Allen's going to really help, too, on the read options. He's going to make you miss. Singletary isn't fast, and he does have a lot of tread from Florida Atlantic. He had 700 carries in college. But I believe so did Zach Moss. They both had a lot of tread on the tires. Moss will probably be more the power back. He may not make a huge contribution early because he's also recovering from an injury. But I like Moss for the future. If you ask me this question 3 years from now, I do think Zach Moss will be their number 1 running back. But right now, Devin Singletary looked really good last year, and I think he's someone you should consider drafting. Not in the 3rd round like some people are drafting him. I think that's outrageously high. But 5th or 6th round would not be bad value. And we'll finish it off with Alexander Mattison, whose stock is going up because we don't know what's going to happen with Dalvin Cook. Stephen Poore mentioned Dalvin Cook's holdout actually mentioned it last week, answered a couple videos ago. I'm not a big handcuff running back guy. I've mentioned that in the past. I'm going to draft guys that have upside to be RB1s or RB2s for my team. But I'm warming up to the idea of taking maybe an Alexander Mattison later in the draft, just because we don't know what's going to happen with Dalvin Cook. I think they will pay him. But if a holdout situation happens, just like Melvin Gordon last year, doesn't start off the season, and it takes him a while to get going, who knows? Alexander Mattison is another guy you have to consider because of the injury history of Dalvin Cook. Where if you look at other instances and stuff, there's other running backs that haven't had quite as much of an injury history. So this is one handcuff that I actually think you should consider taking, just because of that. And I think with Ezra Cleveland added to the offensive line, they made some additions there. They have a decent interior line. I think the offensive line will be better as a whole this year. So keep an eye on that. Kyle Rudolph also helps as a blocker. So I would definitely keep an eye on Alexander Mattison as a guy you can get in the 13th or 14th round in most leagues. He could end up being a fantasy goldmine for you if you consider it. So, moving to the receivers, we have 10. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. A.J. Brown and D.K. Metcalf, the Ole Miss wide receivers that you could argue they both broke out last year, and they really did. A.J. Brown had pretty much a 1,000-yard season. D.K. Metcalf turned it on really nicely at the end of last year. The Seahawks are going to be in a run-heavy offense, but D.K. Metcalf is a freak. He's going to win in the red zone, and he's going to win downfield. A.J. Brown is a guy who got a boatload of targets, and really, Corey Davis is the only other receiver they have there. They're hoping to get something out of him, but they didn't pick up the 5th-year option. A.J. Brown is going to be the top target in that offense, in their pass offense, and Ryan Tannehill really showed a liking to him last year. So those are 2 guys I think you can take in the middle rounds. Could be really solid wide receiver 2s, maybe even low-end wide receiver 1s. Terry McLaurin is another guy in that same category. He kind of broke out last year. Nobody saw it coming. But he is really exciting. Marquise Brown, I believe Fantasy Spartan mentioned him in his comment. A lot of people like Marquise Brown. That offense was pretty much unstoppable when he was at his best last year. But again, injuries, and Lamar Jackson isn't the most accurate thrower. So he's a guy I'm a little bit hesitant on drafting just because of that. Lamar Jackson, they have Miles Boykin there. They have Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle at tight end. They have bigger weapons. So that gives me some reason for hesitation. Plus, Devin Duvernay, the rookie receiver that they got out of Texas in the 3rd round, will be playing some out of the slot. So I think Marquise Brown is a guy you can still take. is boomer bust. He is kind of my boomer bust guy out of this list. Could be a wide receiver one, really, because they did lose some at the tight end position with Hayden Hurst. So there's going to be his targets are going to go to someone. So I'm not high on him just because I don't like taking too many boomer bust guys. But if you feel comfortable with it, go ahead, and he could pay off. Finishing it off with Darius Slayton. We already mentioned him. N'Keal Harry is a guy you can consider because he worked with the team too last year. So did Jarrett Stidham. He's the other quarterback. I didn't mention him with the quarterbacks, but now that I think of it, add him onto the list if you're in extended leagues or if you're in dynasty leagues. I liked him coming out of Auburn. He is a pretty accurate thrower, has decent arm, and he can run with it as well. But N'Keal Harry is a guy who probably worked out more with him while Brady was working out with Edelman more. The team twos generally work together with the wide receiver two. So, maybe N'Keal Harry is the one that has the better numbers than Julian Edelman does this year. I'm not high on him. On Julian Edelman, that is. Two guys that I am really high on this year. Deontay Johnson from the Steelers. I'm not high on him as some other Steelers. Some Steelers are saying, take him 10th, 9th, maybe even 8th round. That's too high for me. If I can get him at the end of the draft, great. If not, oh well. But I do think Deontay Johnson could have a really good year and could benefit from Ben Roethlisberger being back in the offense as a very similar skill set to Antonio Brown. One guy that nobody's really talking about is Paris Campbell, and I'm going to say avoid him. There's some people that, you're starting to see him, especially in dynasty leagues, being taken. I'm not as high on him because Phillip Rivers likes the bigger receivers. Campbell isn't that. But they did draft him in the second round last year, so they obviously think that he has some potential. I wasn't super high on him last year. He's a speed guy, can't run that great of routes. I watched him at the combine. I actually went to the scouting combine last year, and he just wasn't all that impressive. He was okay, but not great. Finishing off the receivers, Hakeem Butler. He was a guy I loved at the combine. His hands aren't the best, but at 6'6", 220 or whatever he is and stuff, ran a 4.49. He has good size and speed to get him win in the red zone, and he can beat you deep as well. He separates late, and he gets better separation than people give him credit for as well. So he's a guy to keep an eye on later in the rounds. Kyler Murray could really be a beneficiary if Butler can stay healthy. He went on IR last year, but I really like Hakeem Butler still. To the tight ends with T.J. Hawkinson. He is a guy I do think, if he can stay healthy, could be a top 10 tight end. Let's not forget, though, that Darrell Bevell said that he is not 100% yet with his feet. He had a foot injury. With bigger tight ends, we've seen foot injuries cause problems in the past before. Something to keep an eye on. One guy that I was praying for the Steelers to draft last year, Foster Moreau. We took Benny Snell instead. Who, by the way, if you're going back to the second-year breakout, guys, do not draft Benny Snell. I don't think he's going to have that great of a year. But to Foster Moreau, Darren Waller is the top guy there. But if something were to happen, Foster Moreau could step in and be a top 10 tight end. I will keep shouting this until he finally is. When Moreau was on the field, I think he had like 5 or 6 touchdowns in a very short period of time. Only had like 150 receiving yards, but he is a big receiving weapon. He aids in the run blocking. I just fell in love with this guy. I watched him at the Combine last year. Oh, he was so good. I really liked watching him. Another guy that I liked was Josh Oliver. Has good speed up the seam. The Jaguars did bring in Tyler Eifert. We'll see who gets the most targets from Gardner Minshew. Another second-year quarterback, now that I think of him. I'm not super high on him this year. You can get him. He'd be a low-end QB2 for you, but no more. But Josh Oliver is a guy I probably wouldn't draft just because Tyler Eifert's there. But he's a guy for the future. I think some team could actually get signed out of him. Noah Fant, I'm not high on just because in the middle rounds, I'm not sure what to think. Albert Okwuegbunam is here. Maybe he has an impact because he already has a relationship with Drew Lock. Because of that, I'm out on Fant, but he probably will still make some impacts in the red zone. He did look good with Drew Lock. So if you are a fan of the Broncos and you are high on him, let me know in the comment section, and I'll mention it. Give me reason to believe that Noah Fant could have some big impact in fantasy football this year. The last one that I want to mention is Irv Smith Jr., who a lot of people think is going to have an increased target share this year because Stephon Diggs is not there. So if you can get him at the end of the draft, another guy to consider. There are a lot of late-round sleeper tight ends this year. They're all guys that I think you should consider taking one of them, especially if you have room for it on your bench, just because of the high upside. We mentioned Mike Gesicki in a previous video. He's a guy. Jonnu Smith, another guy. There are a lot of late-round tight ends that could make really big impacts and be starter tight ends for you by the end of the year. So we'll finish these off. 2 kickers. Matt Gay and Joey Sly. You're thinking, oh, yeah, it's second years. Well, they are second-year kickers. Matt Gay is a guy I would draft. One guy I would not draft is Joey Sly, because I do think Graham Gano has a chance of beating him out. I believe we've covered most of the second-year guys. If I forgot any that you want to mention in the comment section, be sure to do that. I hope you enjoyed this live premiere. If you didn't watch it live, hopefully you chime in the comment section. Again, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate you guys so much for watching. Tell a friend, bring them back, share on your social media, send them here. The more views, the better. So until then, we'll see you next time. Again, not sure when that is, but stay tuned. If you subscribe, you'll get notifications when new videos are out. Some of my videos are just guitar videos and stuff, playing guitar songs, and if you're not into that, that's fine. But if you do subscribe, you will get notified when there are new videos. Thank you all for watching. Tell a friend, subscribe, like, share. We'll see you next time. Enjoy your night.